North Africa, May 1943. The desert is silent, except for the hum of flies and the crackle of heat. The war, for thousands of German soldiers, has ended not with a heroic last stand, but with a white flag tied to a rifle barrel. Across the dunes, the Afrika Korps marches slowly toward the American lines, tired, dusty, and starving. Their boots drag in the sand. Many haven't eaten properly in days. Most expect punishment. Some whisper that the Americans will shoot them once they're out of sight. Corporal Erich Weiss squints through the shimmering air. The horizon looks like a mirage. The closer they get, the more impossible it becomes. Trucks. Rows of them. Fresh paint, polished metal. Soldiers in clean uniforms handing out canteens of water. Not guards. Hosts. Weiss can't understand it. He was told Americans were barbarians, mongrels, lazy and undisciplined. Yet here they are, handing out cigarettes, speaking politely, smiling. When he reaches the checkpoint, a U.S. sergeant gestures toward a waiting tent. "Drop your weapons there, soldier. You'll get food inside." Weiss hesitates. "Essen?" The sergeant nods. "Hot food. Coffee, too." Inside the tent, the smell almost knocks him over. Fresh bread, beans, coffee. Steam rises from metal trays. The Germans stare, not sure if it's a trick. One officer mutters, "They are fattening us before the camp." But the guards don't shout, don't hit. They serve food, tell jokes, even pat a few men on the shoulder. For the first time in years, the Germans eat without orders being barked at them. Someone laughs quietly. Another whispers, "Maybe we are dead." That night, they're loaded onto trucks bound for the coast. The wind smells of salt, not gunpowder. The Americans don't tie their hands. They don't even ride with their rifles ready. It feels wrong, like the war has shifted into another world, where rules are upside down. As the trucks move through the desert, Weiss sees something that makes him blink. An American soldier hands a canteen to a wounded German through the slats of another truck. The German drinks, then gives it back with a nod. The American salutes him and turns away. Weiss looks down at his hands and feels a strange weight. He had been ready to die. Now he feels something worse. Uncertainty. They reach the port of Iran. Rows of American ships line the harbor, white stars painted on their hulls. The Germans are herded aboard one by one. The decks smell of oil and sea spray. Sailors hand out blankets and paper cups of coffee. Coffee. To prisoners. One of them jokes in English, "Don't spill it. It's worth more than gold out here." Weiss sips carefully. It's hot, bitter, real. He looks around. Everyone is quiet. Some stare at the ocean, others at the sky. The American flag flutters in the wind. A few men begin to hum, something that sounds almost like relief. Below deck, the lights stay on all night. The air is clean. The bunks are lined with sheets. The prisoners wait for the blows, the humiliation, the interrogation. None come. A loudspeaker announces breakfast in the morning. Breakfast, Weiss repeats to himself, tasting the word. He remembers the desert, the starvation, the beatings from his own officers, the fear of capture. Now he's given eggs, bread, butter, and fruit. He doesn't understand. He can't. "Why would they feed the enemy?" he asks the man beside him. The man shrugs. "Maybe they want to keep us alive for propaganda." But propaganda doesn't taste like real oranges. It doesn't smell like soap and bacon. As the ship leaves the coast, the prisoners gather at the rail. Behind them, the war fades into dust. Ahead, America. The land they were told was decadent, soft, foolish. The land that, even in victory, treats its enemies with dignity. For the first time, Weiss wonders if the war has already been lost, not in the desert, but in the minds of the men who fought it. The Atlantic crossing takes 2 weeks. The prisoners are allowed on deck daily. They walk, they talk, they even laugh with their guards. One night, a sailor brings out a harmonica. The sound floats across the deck like a memory of home. The Germans listen, in silence. Weiss closes his eyes. The notes remind him of his mother's garden, of rain, of something human. He feels his throat tighten. He doesn't want to cry in front of the Americans. But the music doesn't care. It moves through them all. By the time they see land, something in them has shifted. They are still soldiers, still proud, still defeated. But the hatred feels thinner now, like paint washed away by rain. When the ship docks in Norfolk, Virginia, the prisoners stare in disbelief. No ruins, no bombed cities, just highways, cranes, and bustling docks. America isn't a battlefield. It's a machine that never stopped working. The guards herd them into waiting trains. The cars are clean, the seats padded. Outside the window, green forests rush past, small towns, fields of corn. It looks nothing like the enemy country they imagined. A young American guard notices Weiss staring. "First time in the States," he jokes. Weiss nods slowly. "It's big." The guard laughs. "Yeah, wait till you see Kansas." The train keeps moving west, deeper into a land the prisoners can't comprehend. A land untouched by the war they lost. Somewhere in the middle of that vastness, between the desert and the horizon, Eric Weiss begins to feel something he hasn't felt since the war began. Shame. And curiosity. He looks out the window again and whispers to himself, "What kind of enemy builds a world like this?" The sea smells like rust and oil. The waves crash against the hull with a rhythm that feels endless. Days stretch into a blur of sunlight and spray. The German prisoners spend most of the time standing on deck, leaning against railings, squinting toward the horizon, as if they could still see home. They don't talk much at first. They wait for cruelty, for punishment, for the moment the American kindness will vanish. But it never does. Guards bring them meals 3 times a day, not rations, meals. Hot food, bread, sometimes even pie. Some of the guards smile, some don't, but none of them sneer. They share cigarettes. They lend books. A few even try to practice German, laughing at their own mistakes. "Wie geht's?" they say awkwardly, and the prisoners answer out of habit, "Gut, danke." At night, the prisoners lie awake in their bunks, listening to the hum of the engines below. For many of them, it's the first time they've slept in clean sheets since 1939. The irony burns. They had marched across half of Europe for Hitler's vision of a new world. And now the best sleep they've ever had comes as prisoners of the people they were told were inferior. Corporal Weiss lies staring at the ceiling. He remembers his training, the speeches, the flags, the promises of destiny. None of it fits anymore. He thinks of the American sailor who gave him a second helping of soup earlier that day. "Don't worry, you'll need the strength," the man had said. There was no hatred in his voice, only humor. It unsettled Weiss more than anger ever could. One afternoon, a storm hits. The deck becomes a battlefield of wind and water. Waves slam into the ship, spraying salt across faces. The guards tie ropes along the rails to keep men from sliding overboard. Weiss feels the ocean's power for the first time. The sea doesn't care who wins wars. It swallows everyone the same way. In that chaos, something shifts. The Germans and Americans stop being enemies. They become just men trying not to drown. A few days later, the storm passes. The air clears. The guards open the deck again. The sea is calm, blue, infinite. An American sailor starts singing, a low, lazy tune, something about home and whiskey. His voice carries on the wind. One of the Germans hums along quietly, not recognizing the words but understanding the melody. Within minutes, others join. 2 languages, 1 song. A guard raises his eyebrows but doesn't stop them. For the first time, the prisoners aren't thinking about who's on which side of the gun. The next morning, someone sets up a projector on deck. The prisoners gather, curious. A white sheet flaps in the wind, held down with clamps. The guards crank the machine to life, and a flickering image appears. An American newsreel. Grainy black and white footage of factories, steel, ships, endless assembly lines. The narrator's voice booms over the wind. The arsenal of democracy. Weiss watches, stunned. The scale of it is beyond anything he imagined. Trains loaded with tanks. Women in overalls welding airplane wings. Men driving tractors across fields of corn that stretch to the horizon. America isn't a country. It's a planet. A world where everyone seems to have a role, a purpose. The Germans look at one another in silence. They realize the war they fought was already lost long before the first bomb fell on Berlin. You can't defeat a nation that turns its factories into forests of steel overnight. One prisoner whispers, "They build faster than we can think." Another answers, "And they do it smiling." Later that day, the guards show a second film, this one a comedy. Charlie Chaplin, The Gold Rush. The projector rattles, the images flicker, and laughter starts to ripple through the crowd. It's hesitant at first, quiet chuckles, nervous glances. But it grows. Even Weiss laughs, despite himself. He hasn't laughed since before Stalingrad. The film ends with applause. For a moment, everyone forgets they're enemies. They're just men in the middle of an ocean, watching a little man in a bowler hat dance with bread rolls. That night, Weiss writes something in his notebook. If laughter is freedom, then maybe we have been prisoners for longer than we knew. When the ship finally reaches New York Harbor, it's dawn. The city rises out of the mist like a monument to another civilization. Towers of glass and stone, endless docks, cranes, trains, lights. The Germans press against the rails, wide-eyed. None of them imagined this. They were told America was weak, lazy, soft. But here it stands, untouched, immense, alive. The ship passes under the Statue of Liberty. The prisoners are silent. One of them whispers, "That's what they fight for." Weiss doesn't answer. He just stares, trying to understand what it means that the symbol of freedom is the first thing a defeated man sees. When they dock, there are no jeers, no crowds shouting insults. Just order, efficiency. Trucks wait to take them inland. They're given paper tags, instructions, even pamphlets explaining prisoner rights. You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention, it says. Weiss reads the words 3 times. In Germany, those words meant nothing. Here, they mean everything. As the trucks roll through the city, the prisoners see children playing in parks, men reading newspapers at cafes, women carrying groceries. Life continues as if the war doesn't exist. The realization stings. They fought for a regime that promised 1,000 years of order, but here, across the ocean, ordinary people already live in the future. By the time they leave New York behind and head into the countryside, silence fills the trucks. No one sings, no one jokes. Each man is lost in his own thoughts. For the first time, many of them begin to wonder not when the war will end, but what they were fighting for in the first place. The train slows as it crosses into the heart of America. The landscape rolls past like a moving postcard. Green hills, barns, small towns with church steeples and white fences. The prisoners watch in silence, their faces pressed to the glass. Some whisper, "Is this real?" They expected barbed wire, punishment, maybe starvation. What they see instead looks like peace. The train stops at a small station somewhere in the Midwest. A U.S. Army officer climbs aboard, clipboard in hand. "Listen up, gentlemen," he says in slow, deliberate English. "You are prisoners of war. You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. You will work, you will eat, you will have shelter. You will not be harmed, unless you try to escape. Welcome to the United States." The word welcome echoes in the car like a joke that no one understands. The men look at each other, waiting for the punchline. None comes. Outside, trucks are waiting to take them to the camps. They drive for hours through farmland, rows of corn bending in the wind. Weiss watches the endless fields slide by. The land seems untouched by war. No craters, no ruins, no burned villages. He feels small, as if Germany had been fighting a ghost. When they arrive, it isn't what anyone imagined. Camp Ruston, Louisiana, Camp Swift, Texas, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Each is a small city of wooden barracks, surrounded by wire fences, yes, but inside the fences are gardens, soccer fields, workshops, kitchens, and, astonishingly, libraries. Weiss steps off the truck and blinks. The air smells like pine. Birds are singing. There's a sign over the entrance that reads, "Work earns freedom." The phrase is chillingly familiar, but here it feels different. Less like a threat, more like a rule for living. The first thing that strikes him is the order. Everything is clean, structured, almost comfortable. Guards walk calmly, not shouting, not pointing guns. A group of prisoners is playing soccer in the field. Another group is painting signs in English. Laundry, canteen, theater. Theater? Weiss rubs his eyes. A sergeant hands him a stack of clean clothes, soap, and a towel. "Showers are that way," he says, nodding toward a long, low building. Weiss hesitates. A shower. In Germany, a shower for prisoners means something else entirely. His chest tightens. He looks around, half expecting someone to start laughing at his fear. But when he enters, he finds rows of actual showers. Running water, clean tiles, steam. The air smells of soap, not gas. Men are washing, scrubbing their hair, humming to themselves. Weiss steps under the water, and it hits him like forgiveness. He stands there, letting the heat soak into his bones. He hasn't felt warm water in years. For a moment, he forgets where he is. Afterward, the prisoners line up for food. Stew, bread, fruit, coffee. Real coffee. An officer explains that they'll be assigned to work details soon. Farm labor, carpentry, road maintenance. But for now, they're to rest and acclimate. Acclimate, Weiss repeats. The word feels alien. He expected suffering, not acclimation. That evening, the camp loudspeaker crackles to life. Attention prisoners, the canteen is open until 9. Movie night at 8 in the recreation hall. The prisoners laugh. A movie? It must be propaganda. But curiosity wins. They gather in the hall, rows of benches, a projector humming at the back, the smell of popcorn filling the air. Popcorn. The absurdity makes Weiss smile, despite himself. The lights dim. On the screen appears the MGM lion, roaring. The film is a western. Cowboys, horses, wide-open skies. The Americans watch from the sides, smiling as the prisoners react. At first, the Germans sit stiffly, suspicious. Then someone laughs. Then another. Soon the whole hall is laughing. The villain is a drunk sheriff, and the hero is a farmer who stands up for his land. It's simple, almost childish, but it's human. When the film ends, there's applause. Not forced, not polite. Real applause. The projector hums to a stop. The lights come on, and the guards are clapping too. Weiss feels something break inside him. Not pain, but release. The laughter has made him feel human again, and that's more terrifying than captivity. After the screening, a few prisoners linger. One of the American guards approaches them. "Tomorrow, we're showing another one," he says. "Charlie Chaplin. You'll like it." Weiss nods without thinking. "Danke," he mutters, and the guard smiles. Over the following weeks, the rhythm of camp life takes hold. Work in the morning, rest in the afternoon, movies in the evening. Some prisoners build furniture for the officers, others tend gardens, teaching the Americans how to make proper compost. They earn small wages, enough to buy cigarettes or chocolate from the canteen. For men who expected brutality, it feels like another world. But not everyone adapts easily. Some officers call it brainwashing. They warn the others not to get too comfortable, not to trust the Americans. "They're softening us," one says, "so we won't fight when they conquer us." The words ring hollow even to him. The camp doesn't feel like conquest. It feels like decency. Letters arrive from home. News of bombings, rationing, cities turned to rubble. The contrast is unbearable. Weiss reads about his hometown, gone. His mother's bakery, gone. He sits in the sun, holding the letter, surrounded by trees, laughter, and birdsong, and feels guilt twist in his chest. Why does the enemy's land feel more like home than his own? The camp begins to take on a strange life of its own. Prisoners form orchestras. A group of architects builds a small chapel out of scrap wood. Someone organizes a chess tournament. The guards start calling the place Little Germany. For the first time, the prisoners stop being soldiers. They become men again, cooks, artists, teachers, dreamers. One day, an American journalist visits to write about the camp. He interviews Weiss through a translator. "What surprises you most about life here?" he asks. Weiss thinks for a long time before answering. "That we are not treated like beasts," he says quietly, "and that I don't know if I deserve it." That night, he dreams of home, his father's bakery, his mother laughing, the smell of bread. He wakes to the sound of the morning bugle and the sunlight pouring through the cracks in the barracks wall. For a moment, he forgets he's a prisoner. The next day, he lines up with the others for roll call. The guard salutes. Weiss, almost by instinct, salutes back. Evening in the camp smells like dust and pine. The air cools, the sun slips behind the trees, and the prisoners drift toward the recreation hall, drawn by habit. The movies have become part of their new rhythm, a strange kind of ritual. Work, food, and then film. For most of them, it's the only time of day they stop feeling like prisoners. Inside, the hall buzzes with anticipation. The benches are full, the projector hums in the back, and a young American corporal is fiddling with the reels. He jokes in broken German. Heute Kino, keine Arbeit. Tonight, movies, no work. The room laughs. Weiss sits near the front. He's stopped pretending he doesn't enjoy it. The films have changed him. They've changed all of them. At first, the laughter felt dangerous, like betrayal. Now it feels necessary. The lights dim. The screen flickers to life. It's not a Western this time, not a comedy. The first image is of a family. Mother, father, children, sitting around a table. The father returns from work, tired but smiling. The children hug him. They pray before dinner. Simple, ordinary. The camera pans out to show a small town, white fences, a dog running in the yard. The narrator's voice speaks softly about community, freedom, and hope. It's a propaganda short, yes, but it doesn't feel like propaganda. It feels like life. Weiss watches, transfixed. The images are too familiar and too foreign at once. They remind him of home before the war, the bakery, the smell of flour, his mother's hands. But here the people aren't afraid. The men don't wear uniforms, the walls aren't plastered with orders. No one is shouting. The film shifts to show American soldiers returning from battle. They're welcomed with parades, music, kisses, laughter. It feels unreal, staged. Yet something inside Weiss aches. He realizes he's forgotten what joy looks like. He can't remember the last time he saw a crowd smile. When the film ends, no one claps. The silence hangs heavy. The lights come back on, and for a long moment, no one moves. Then a man in the back stands up. His name is Otto, a former teacher from Hamburg. His voice trembles as he says, "We were told they were monsters. But look at them. They live like this." Another prisoner mutters, "It's all lies, a trick." Otto shakes his head. "Maybe. But even if it is, why do I wish it were true?" Later that night, Weiss lies awake staring at the ceiling. He can still see the images. The dinner table, the music, the laughter. They haunt him more than the bombs ever did. He turns to the man in the bunk beside him. "Do you think it's real?" he whispers. The man shrugs. "Does it matter? It's possible. That's what scares me." The next day, during work detail, Weiss notices small changes. Guards and prisoners talk more. Someone starts whistling an American tune. A few men practice English with the camp interpreter, awkwardly stringing words together. "Good morning. Thank you. Movie good." The guards grin. It feels like a fragile truce between worlds. A few days later, another film. This one is different. It's news footage. Allied troops liberating villages in France. The screen fills with rubble, smoke, and faces. Civilian faces, gaunt and hollow. Children reaching for chocolate bars from American hands. The prisoners shift uncomfortably. The narrator speaks of rebuilding, of freedom, of helping the broken. Then come the camps, real camps. Barbed wire, corpses, the skeletal survivors of the Holocaust. The footage is brief, but enough. The air in the hall freezes. Someone whispers, "It's not true." Another says, "It can't be." But the film doesn't flinch. The camera lingers on the faces of the dead. There are no words left to hide behind. Weiss feels nausea crawl up his throat. He looks down at his hands, clean, fed, free to move. He thinks of the American guards, the food, the laughter, the films. He feels a wave of shame so deep it's almost physical. He had believed in something. He had served something. And now that something looks like rot. When the projector stops, no one speaks. The guards don't move either. The silence is unbearable. Finally, the American corporal says quietly, "That's enough for tonight." The lights flicker back on, revealing tears on faces that never thought they could cry in front of an enemy. Outside, the night air feels heavy. The prisoners disperse slowly. Weiss walks alone toward the fence, staring at the dark trees beyond. Somewhere, an owl hoots. He grips the wire, feeling the cold bite into his skin. "We lost more than the war," he says under his breath. "We lost ourselves." The next morning, the camp is quiet. Men move slower, talk softer. Something fundamental has changed. For years they were told that strength was cruelty and mercy was weakness. Now they've seen the opposite, and the truth is more devastating than any defeat. A week later, a group of prisoners approaches the camp's American chaplain. They ask if they can borrow books about American history. When he brings them, they thank him in halting English. One man, a former Nazi Party member, spends hours reading about the US Constitution. "So," he says slowly, "their Führer is the law itself." Weiss begins keeping a journal. He writes about the films, about the guards, about his confusion. One entry reads, "They win because they believe in something that doesn't need a whip. We obeyed out of fear. They act out of faith. I don't know which is stronger, but I know which one I prefer." Weeks pass. The camp feels different now. The laughter returns, but it's quieter, gentler. Some prisoners begin helping with English classes for others. A few even ask the guards to replay certain movies, comedies, westerns, anything that shows a world without uniforms. By Christmas, the camp orchestra plays both German carols and American hymns. The guards bring extra rations. They eat together in the mess hall. Someone sets up the projector again. This time it's a Wonderful Life. Weiss watches as George Bailey learns that kindness can save a man's soul. When the final bell rings on screen, a few men actually applaud through tears. That night, snow begins to fall outside the barracks. Weiss steps outside and looks up, the flakes catching in the floodlights. The world feels quiet, fragile, impossibly far from everything he thought war was supposed to mean. He whispers to himself, not in German but in English now. "Freedom is not what they told us. It's this." Spring 1945. The war in Europe is crumbling. The radio static that once carried Hitler's speeches now hums with confusion and fear. Germany is breaking from the inside. But somewhere across the ocean, its soldiers are writing letters home about a strange kind of captivity. One that feels more like rehabilitation than revenge. The words America and camp start to sound almost mythical. Whispers travel from one prisoner transport to another. Clean beds, warm food, kind guards. Then come the unbelievable rumors. Movies, books, even musical performances. Soldiers on the front lines, exhausted and starving, don't believe it at first. "They're lying," one officer says. "The Americans don't treat prisoners like that." But the evidence grows. Men captured in France or Italy send postcards with the same message. "Do not fear surrender. You will be treated well." By the spring thaw, surrender rates begin to rise. Thousands of German soldiers, trapped between hopeless orders and the approaching Allied forces, decide to raise their hands instead of their rifles. In a war that glorified death over defeat, they choose to live. And in some small, quiet way, that choice changes history. Back in the United States, the camps are reaching capacity. Hundreds of thousands of POWs now live scattered across the Midwest, the South, and New England. To outsiders, they look like fenced-in villages. Inside, they function like miniature societies. The prisoners grow vegetables, teach each other math and philosophy, publish small camp newspapers, and even perform theater. It's not paradise. There are still fences, still guards, but there's also dignity. The U.S. government didn't create these camps out of pure compassion. It was strategy, part moral, part political. They knew that every German soldier treated humanely was a message to the world. This is what democracy looks like. Mercy, too, could be propaganda. It could be a weapon sharper than fear. The Geneva Convention was the official reason. But behind the rules was something deeper. An American belief that the war wasn't just about land or power. It was about proving an idea. The idea that freedom, even extended to an enemy, was stronger than tyranny forced upon a friend. At Camp Ruston, a visiting U.S. officer named Major Harold Thompson gave a speech to the prisoners. He stood before them, sunlight glinting off his medals, and said, "You came here as soldiers. You will leave here as men. Remember how you were treated, because one day, Germany will need men who remember." The translator's voice trembled as he repeated the words in German. The prisoners sat in silence. Weiss wrote them down in his notebook. Across the Atlantic, German officers in collapsing strongholds heard strange things from their captured soldiers. "The Americans feed us. They let us work. They even show us movies." It sounded like a hallucination. One general scoffed, "Movies? They make them soft." But another muttered, "Maybe that's why they win." Inside the camps, the transformation deepened. The Red Cross brought books, typewriters, even musical instruments. The Americans encouraged it. They wanted to plant seeds, ideas about freedom, about responsibility, about what life could be after the Reich. Philosophers who'd once quoted Nietzsche now read Jefferson and Lincoln. In one camp, prisoners held debates about democracy versus dictatorship. A man who had been a Hitler youth leader stood up and said, "I believed the state was God. Now I think God is the state that leaves me alone." Weiss attended these discussions, not as a leader but as a listener. He didn't trust his own thoughts anymore. He wrote in his journal, "They are re-educating us, but not with lectures, with decency. Every kind word feels like a mirror, showing me what we could have been if we had chosen mercy instead of fear." Meanwhile, American guards also changed. At first, they treated the Germans with suspicion or contempt. But months of coexistence softened them too. Some guards shared cigarettes, others shared stories of home. They discovered that many of these enemies were just farm boys, clerks, students. Not monsters, not myths, just men. In Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, a guard named Private Henry Cook became close friends with a young German mechanic. They fixed trucks together, traded jokes, taught each other words in their languages. Years later, Cook would tell his grandchildren, "That boy fixed my Jeep so it wouldn't stall. Then he told me his mother used to bake bread at 4 a.m. before school. He was my enemy, but he reminded me of me." By late summer 1945, the war is over. Germany surrenders. In the camps, the news spreads slowly, cautiously. Some cheer, others weep. Many simply stare into the distance, unsure how to feel. They've spent years fighting for something that no longer exists, and months living in the care of the people who destroyed it. Then something extraordinary happens. American officers start screening films again. Not war films, not propaganda. Real Hollywood movies. Casablanca, The Grapes of Wrath, Gone with the Wind. Weiss sits in the front row. The camp is quiet except for the hum of the projector. On screen, Americans argue about love, justice, dignity, and dreams. The prisoners watch, mesmerized. These people, so ordinary, so free, don't need a Führer to tell them who they are. When Casablanca ends, Weiss feels something like revelation. The final scene, Rick telling Ilsa that the problems of 3 little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world, hits him like scripture. The idea that self-sacrifice, not conquest, is the measure of greatness feels like heresy, and yet profoundly right. That night, Weiss writes again, "We were taught that compassion weakens a nation, but perhaps it is what makes one eternal." The next morning, an American guard announces that some prisoners will soon be repatriated. The news spreads like electricity. Men line up for forms, for photographs, the medical checks. Weiss feels both relief and fear. He's going home. But what is home now? Before departure, the Americans gather the prisoners for a final meeting. The camp commander thanks them for their discipline, their work, their cooperation. "Remember," he says, "the way you were treated here. One day, you will rebuild your country. Make it better than the one you lost." As the buses pull away, the prisoners wave. Some guards wave back. Others stand quietly, hands in pockets, watching history roll down the dirt road. On the ship home, Weiss stands at the rail again, just as he did 2 years earlier. But now the horizon means something different. He's not looking for victory or revenge. He's looking for understanding. He opens his notebook one last time and writes, "They defeated us without hatred. They conquered us with what we never understood. Kindness. They used humanity as a weapon, and it was the one we could not fight." When he arrives in Germany, everything is rubble. Cities flattened, silence everywhere. But in the ruins, people are rebuilding. Children play among the stones. He walks through the wreckage, clutching his notebook. A neighbor asks what America was like. Weiss thinks for a long time before answering. "It was the first place I felt like a human being." Autumn 1946. The ship cuts through the grey Atlantic like a ghost. The war has been over for more than a year, but for the men standing at the rail, it doesn't feel finished. The horizon looks the same as it did on the journey west, but they are not the same men. They are leaner, quieter, older, and infinitely heavier with thought. Erich Weiss stands near the bow, his hands in his coat pockets. The air is cold, sharp with salt. Behind him, America fades into mist. Ahead lies the wreckage of everything he once believed in. Around him, the others speak in low voices. Some joke about beer and bread, about the girls they'll see again. But the laughter sounds hollow, forced. Most of them know what awaits. Bombed-out cities, broken families, the endless ash of defeat. And yet, beneath it all, there's a flicker of something else. Hope, maybe. Or guilt. The journey back feels slower. The guards are gone now, they're free men again. The Americans have given them food for the trip, blankets, even paper to write on. One sailor shakes Weiss's hand before disembarking. "Good luck, buddy," he says. Weiss hesitates, then answers in English. "Thank you. For everything." The sailor grins. "Don't thank me. Build something better." When the ship reaches Bremerhaven, the men are silent. Germany is unrecognizable. The port is a graveyard of cranes and twisted metal. Smoke still rises from the ruins. The stench of war lingers in the air. Weiss steps off the gangplank and feels the ground of his homeland beneath his boots. It doesn't feel like home. The authorities process them quickly. Papers, stamps, new identity cards. Occupation Zone American. The irony doesn't escape him. The land he fought for now belongs, in part, to the people who fed him. He takes a train inland. The countryside looks like it's been erased. Fields untended. Villages burned. Bridges collapsed. When the train stops in Kassel, Weiss steps out and just stands there. Where his family's bakery once stood is a pile of bricks. He picks up a single charred loaf tin from the debris, still blackened by fire. He holds it to his chest like a relic. Days pass. Weeks. He sleeps in a shelter with other displaced people. There are no jobs, little food, no government worth the name. But something in him refuses to give up. The Americans had told them that work was the first step toward rebuilding the soul. So he begins helping to clear rubble, brick by brick. One afternoon, a U.S. Army truck rolls through the street distributing food aid. A soldier recognizes the German prisoners from his time as a guard. "You were at Camp Ruston, weren't you?" he asks Weiss. Weiss nods. The soldier tosses him a can of coffee. "Thought you might miss this." Weiss laughs for the first time in months. "More than you know," he says. Slowly, life begins to return. The new currency, the Marshall Plan, reconstruction teams. But beneath the rebuilding, there's a deeper transformation taking root. Men like Weiss carry an invisible seed back from America. A memory of dignity, of decency, of what civilization can look like when it isn't built on fear. He starts writing again. His journal becomes a book, small and worn, titled Letters from Captivity. It's not about war or victory. It's about coffee, laughter, and movies in the dark. About kindness. About how, in the strangest twist of fate, captivity had set him free. Years later, he's invited to speak to a group of students in a rebuilt school. They ask him what he learned in America. He pauses for a long time before answering. "I learned," he says slowly, "that a strong country doesn't need to shout. It just needs to keep its promises." A girl raises her hand. "Did they treat you well?" Weiss smiles. "Better than we treated ourselves." By the 1950s, the world has moved on. Germany is divided, then rebuilt, then reborn. The American camps are dismantled, their barracks repurposed into schools, warehouses, even cinemas. But the memory remains. A quiet legend passed between generations of men who saw what mercy could do. One evening, many years later, Weiss walks through a small German town now filled with light and music. There's a new cinema on the corner, rebuilt from an old warehouse. He hesitates, then buys a ticket. Inside, the air smells of popcorn and polish. The lights dim. The projector hums. The film begins, an American one. It's in color now, brilliant and loud. But the feeling is the same. Laughter fills the room. People smile in the dark. Weiss sits in the back, his eyes reflecting the flickering light. For a moment, he's back in Louisiana, sitting on a wooden bench, watching cowboys and dreamers. Back when enemies shared the same jokes. Back when kindness felt like rebellion. When the credits roll, he doesn't move. He closes his eyes and whispers the words he wrote long ago. They defeated us without hatred. As the audience files out, he remains seated, alone but not lonely. Outside, church bells ring across the town. Somewhere, children are laughing. The world has turned again, and this time, he believes it might keep turning. He stands, puts on his hat, and walks out into the evening air. The lights of the cinema glow behind him. In the reflection of the window, he catches a glimpse of his own face. Older, lined, but peaceful. For the first time in decades, he feels truly free.